Hello and welcome to this tutorial video. Today we're going to take a quick look at assessment and the assessment types that you're going to use or be part of in helping students improve in any given area or subject. Assessment will reflect the different stages of a student's learning journey. They may have just begun and you need to get to know them, or you have to confirm learning from lessons, or they are ending their journey with you and you need to prepare them for formal testing or exams. Now, all of this is going to be done in conjunction with your teacher and others like the Senko in your school, so one of the key things is to make sure that you are assisting in the facilitation of these assessments and understand what they are for. It is unlikely that you'll get to choose, at least not in the beginning, which assessments you're going to do at a particular time, but you'll be asked to take part in a range of different tests and assessments. I remember when I first started in the school as a teaching assistant, I was asked to assist with the CAT tests, and I was just asked to sit in the room and make sure that they did it in the exam conditions. I didn't really know what the tests were about at the time. I'd never been taught about them. Then I went and did the research myself, which helped me understand what they are for and how the school uses them. So that's the first thing I'd say about any assessment that you're involved with. Know why you're doing it and why the school's doing it. Okay, so let's continue. Through the time that you're working with a student, there are 4 types of assessment that you work with them. I'll list them first so you have an idea what they are, and then you'll see how they are being used at different times for different things. There is baselining, which is a type of assessment where we get to know a student's starting point. A second type that we can use is called diagnostic assessment, and this diagnostic assessment allows us to look in something in detail. Again, I'll go into it further and give examples in a couple of minutes. The third type is formative assessment, where you're checking the progress along the way and learning what a student needs to work on. The last of these is summative. This is normally quite formal and sometimes external. This one is to try and find a final, definitive position for that student. They usually are at the end of modules, terms, school years, or key stages. Let's look further at baseline assessment. You're going to be assessing where students are at the beginning of an interaction, either generally or specifically within a subject or module. So, for example, what's their ability like in numeracy? What's their spatial or visual awareness like? What's their IQ level? This is basically CAT testing, by the way. What's their reading level? What do they know about genetics? Looking at it in a different way, football trials are something very similar. They try and get a base level of where everyone is, so they can be trained in the right way, or put forward to compete in matches. So the idea is to get an understanding of exactly where a student is so they can be taught correctly for them. You can convey the purpose to students so they don't become anxious and they feel more comfortable with the process. There are a lot of discussions about whether labelling or giving students certain grades or expectations becomes self-fulfilling, whether they remain at a low level if you started them off with a low baseline. It's good to baseline a few times in a few different ways to get a fair assessment of where a child is. This is particularly important if you're working with students who don't always put in their best effort. One of the schools I worked in, we dealt with students who, for one reason or another, had been removed from other schools. So when they came to us, their confidence was shot. They were very upset, very let down. When we baselined them at that time, they would do very poorly, because we tried to baseline them as soon as they came in, just because that's a natural place to do it. What we found was that after 6 weeks, they showed huge improvement. Now, we hadn't taught them anything amazingly new or brilliant in that period of time, but we'd found their mojo, their happiness. They felt more comfortable with us, and therefore they'd gotten much better baseline results. So, we used to baseline several times over a 6-week period, just to see where a student was at as their confidence grew with us. There's no baseline assessment that I know of that measures confidence that then can be used to adjust grades. So it's really good to make sure that you're testing students at the right time if you can. Clearly, this will depend on the resources you have available at your school and their own policies. It is always worth considering what we have already learned in this course. Imagine if we took a student who is in a bad mood or couldn't be bothered and tested them. They would likely get a low score, which in many schools would mean they are put in a low ability class and not taught at their real level. In cases like this, the student has done a real disservice, which not only might have consequences with regard to their academic progress, but also their behaviour, as they become frustrated. So it's always good to check your baseline over and over during an extended period, just to make sure that you are getting what you want, and it's not a mood-affected or situationally affected result. The second type of assessment that you might be involved with is a diagnostic assessment. Now, a diagnostic assessment allows you to look at something in more detail, so it goes further in depth. For example, if I do a set of assessments with a student, I might find out that in terms of functional skills they had a low-level result, but I'm not sure why. So I then go further and then do assessments about their writing ability. And in their writing assessments, I look specifically at their spelling, punctuation, and grammar, in order to really focus. Often issues are linked, so you can choose to diagnose a range of things or focus in more detail to discover the root of a problem. So in terms of your practical day-to-day work in helping with assessments, you might be facilitating or talking students through the process, or you might just be the person who hands out the tests to them and collects the answer sheets. You might be the person that invigilates while they do a test, or you might be the person who tries to make it more comfortable for them as they're doing it. As a teaching assistant, you're going to have a range of roles, but remember, knowing what a student is doing and why is vital. In the case of a diagnostic assessment, you're trying to find more detail out about a given area in particular. The next assessment on the list is a formative assessment. Formative assessments help understand how a student can improve and what we can do to help. As part of a formative assessment, we will ask questions, or we will set mini-assessments along the way while the student's learning to try and make sure that we know they're on track with what we're doing. We have to then analyse how well the student has done so we can help the teacher plan on how to close gaps and help the student improve. Normally this will come from the teacher, so you might be in a situation where you're going to echo what the teacher's saying, or you're going to take some part of the information gained and work one-to-one or with a group of students to help their progress. With regard to summative assessment, it's very unlikely that you're going to be creating any of your own. These are much more like an end-of-term test or end-of-unit tests or coursework which gives a final grade. So your role is really going to be about you invigilating, making the student feel comfortable, maybe assisting those with special needs in reading, but more than anything, just assisting the teacher in making sure that this assessment goes really well. There might be occasions when you read out questions, as I mentioned earlier, or even write for the student, for example, if the student has broken their arm. There are rules to doing these, so you have to make sure that you know what they are before carrying out these duties. Writing for a student is rare unless you work in a special educational needs setting. I can only think of one time where I've had to scribe for a student because they had broken their right arm in a sports game and they couldn't write. As I mentioned earlier, you need to know what the purpose of each assessment is and what it is like for the students, so it is good practice to take some of the assessments yourself so you have first-hand experience. I know that might sound a little outlandish, but it does give you an idea of what the student goes through, so it's actually quite important. Remember, to know what students are going through, you must have up-to-date knowledge and understanding. Your own exams might have been some time ago, and things change. Many teachers and teaching assistants will think they know automatically what the students understand, when in fact they do not. By participating yourself, you will have a real understanding. Thank you. I will see you in the next tutorial.